Have you ever noticed that some of the smartest people don't seem interested in being around others all the time? Not because they hate people, not because they're antisocial, but because they've discovered something most of us never do. We've been taught to believe that a busy social life is a happy life. The more friends, the more parties, the more conversations, the happier you must be. But psychology tells a more complicated story. For some people, constant social interaction isn't energizing, it's exhausting. Here's the surprising question. Why would someone voluntarily choose to spend an evening alone instead of being surrounded by people? The answer isn't loneliness. It's something entirely different. Imagine two people finishing a long day at work. The first immediately calls friends, plans dinner, and can't wait to be around people. By the end of the night, they feel recharged. The second politely declines every invitation. They go home, read a book, work on a personal project, or simply sit in silence with a cup of coffee. By the end of the night, they also feel recharged. Same evening, completely different source of energy. This difference has been studied for decades. Psychologists don't simply divide people into social and unsocial. Instead, they recognize that people differ in how they respond to stimulation. For some, busy environments are exciting. For others, too much stimulation quickly becomes mentally draining. Being alone isn't always an escape from people. Sometimes, it's a way of recovering your ability to think clearly. Think about the last time you spent an entire day surrounded by people. Meetings, messages, phone calls, conversations, notifications. By the end of the day, were you physically tired or mentally overloaded? There's a difference, and many people confuse the two. Research on personality has consistently shown that people differ in how much external stimulation they naturally seek. This doesn't mean one personality is better than another. It simply means the environment that energizes one person may completely exhaust someone else. But here's where things become interesting. Some researchers have found that for certain people, time alone isn't just relaxing. It can actually improve the way they think. Why? The answer lies inside your brain. So, what actually happens inside your brain when you're finally alone? The answer might explain why your best ideas rarely appear in the middle of a noisy conversation. Imagine trying to solve a difficult puzzle. Now imagine 20 people talking around you. Your phone vibrates every few minutes. Someone asks you a question. A notification appears, then another. Could you still think clearly? Probably not, because attention is one of the brain's most limited resources. Every interruption forces your mind to switch focus, and every switch comes with a hidden cost. Psychologists call this attention residue. When you constantly move from one task or one conversation to another, part of your attention remains stuck on what you were doing before. Instead of thinking deeply, your brain keeps restarting, again and again. Think about the last time you suddenly found the answer to a problem. Wasn't while scrolling through social media, or during a quiet walk, a shower, or a moment when nobody was asking anything from you. For many people, the answer is the second one. And that's not a coincidence. Neuroscientists have found that when the brain isn't focused on an immediate task, a network known as the default mode network becomes more active. This network is associated with processes like reflecting on experiences, connecting ideas, imagining the future, and understanding ourselves. In other words, some of our deepest thinking happens when the world finally becomes quiet. But here's where people often get confused. Being alone doesn't automatically make someone wiser. It's what they do with that solitude that matters. One person spends 2 hours alone, endlessly scrolling through short videos. Another spends those same 2 hours learning a new skill, writing, thinking, or solving a difficult problem. Both were alone. Only one used solitude to create something valuable. That's why solitude itself isn't the advantage. Intentional solitude is. Many scientists, writers, and inventors have deliberately protected uninterrupted time for deep work, not because they disliked people, but because complex thinking often requires long periods without constant interruption. The goal wasn't isolation, it was concentration. But there's another reason some intelligent people protect their time alone, and it has nothing to do with productivity. It has everything to do with the people they choose to spend their time with. But here's the biggest misunderstanding. People often assume that enjoying solitude means you don't like people. In reality, those are two completely different things. Imagine 2 weekends. On the first, you spend 2 full days surrounded by people. Messages never stop, plans keep changing, conversations continue for hours. By Sunday night, you're exhausted, not because the people were bad, but because your mind never had a chance to slow down. Now imagine another weekend. You meet one close friend for coffee, have one meaningful conversation, spend the rest of the day reading, walking, or working on something you care about. This time, you return to Monday feeling refreshed. The difference wasn't how many people did you meet. It was how much mental space did you have. Think about your own friendships. Would you rather have 20 people who know your name or 2 people who truly knows your struggles? Most people already know the answer. Psychologists have consistently found that the quality of relationships is a much stronger predictor of well-being than the number of relationships. One of the clearest examples comes from the Harvard study of adult development, one of the longest-running studies ever conducted on human happiness. After following participants for decades, researchers reached a remarkably consistent conclusion. Strong, trusting, supportive relationships predict health and happiness far better than fame, status, or wealth. So why do some intelligent people appear to have smaller social circles? Not because they value people less, often because they value their time more carefully. As your life becomes busier, time quietly becomes your most limited resource. Every invitation, every conversation, every commitment has an invisible cost. Saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else. A quiet evening, a personal project, time with family, or simply time to think. That's why many people become more selective, not more antisocial. They're protecting their attention. And there's another reason. Deep conversations require energy. Listening carefully, asking thoughtful questions, being emotionally present. For many people, having one meaningful conversation is far more fulfilling than spending an entire evening making small talk. The goal was never to avoid people. The goal was to spend more time with the right people. Because solitude isn't the opposite of connection. Sometimes it's what makes genuine connection possible. So, does this mean, should the smartest people avoid others? Absolutely not, because there's a huge difference between choosing solitude and suffering from loneliness. Imagine 2 people sitting alone in identical rooms. The first feels peaceful. They're reading, thinking, or simply enjoying the silence. The second feels trapped. They desperately want someone to call, someone to understand them. From the outside, both people are alone, but psychologically, they're living completely different experiences. Loneliness isn't defined by the number of people around you. It's defined by the gap between the relationships you want and the relationships you actually have. That's why someone can feel lonely at a crowded party, while someone else can spend an entire weekend alone and feel completely content. Think back to the quietest moment you've ever enjoyed. Maybe it was early morning, a walk after sunset, a long drive, or simply sitting alone without your phone. Did that moment feel empty, or did it feel peaceful? Sometimes, the silence we've been trying to escape is exactly where we hear ourselves most clearly. Psychologists generally agree that healthy solitude can support reflection, creativity, and emotional regulation. But chronic unwanted loneliness is different. Research has linked prolonged loneliness with poorer mental and physical health outcomes. The goal isn't to isolate yourself from the world. The goal is to become comfortable enough with yourself that being alone no longer feels like something to fear. The people who seem most comfortable in their own company aren't always the most intelligent. Often, they're the people who've learned one important lesson. Your value isn't measured how many people want your attention. It's measured by how peacefully you can live when nobody is asking for it. Maybe the real reason some intelligent people prefer being alone has nothing to do with disliking others. Maybe they've simply discovered that constant noise makes it harder to hear their own thoughts. So they protect moments of silence, not to escape the world, but to return to it with a clearer mind. Because in a world that constantly demands your attention, the ability to sit quietly, to think deeply, and to know yourself may be one of the rarest skills anyone can develop. If this documentary changed the way you think about solitude, subscribe for more psychology documentaries that challenge common beliefs with real research. And before you go, tell me in the comments, do you feel more energized after spending time with people or after spending some time alone? There isn't a right or wrong answer, only a better understanding of how your own mind works. And in the next documentary, we'll explore another question that quietly affects millions of people: why your brain overthinks everything. You might discover that overthinking isn't a lack of intelligence. It's often your brain trying to solve problems that don't actually exist.